Tonight we begin our series of interviews before the election on November 6th. Our guest tonight is the independent candidate running for Suffolk County District Attorney. We'd like to welcome Michael Maloney. Thank you very much for being with us, Michael.
It's great to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Tell us about your background, because you are a lawyer, obviously, a defense attorney, but you're also an entrepreneur. So how do these things prepare you to be a DA?
Well, I think it's actually a combination of the two. The district attorney's position is one, obviously, you are an attorney, but more importantly, you're setting the protocol and the procedure for the 300 plus staff directly below you. You're setting the protocol and the procedure that they're going to follow, and really dealing with the flow of cases. There are tens upon thousands of cases that the district attorney is responsible for seeing. And coming with 10 years as a criminal defense attorney, along with having managed, sold, and built numerous companies, my background, I'd say, is a combination of a responsible, progressive platform, and that's really why I'm running.
Well, as a defense attorney, a lot of your clients were people in trouble with the law because of drug use or maybe even possession. What did you learn from that?
Well, I learned that nobody wants to be an addict. The overwhelming majority of the individuals that are in the criminal justice system are there as a result of mental health, poverty, disease, or defect, oftentimes stemming from addiction. And what I've learned is that each one of these individuals, each one of these cases, there's a story behind that. There's a family that's impacted, and the collateral repercussions of being swallowed whole by the criminal justice system have ripple effects that follow an individual around for the rest of their life. I really take the proactive approach of breaking these into various categories. And what I mean by that, if this is a violent offender, if this is someone who is proactively harming the community, then that is an individual that will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law under my administration. But that's not what the majority of the cases are. The overwhelming majority of the cases are individuals that truly need help. The overwhelming majority of the cases are individuals that are dealing with a societal problem, mental health, poverty, or addiction, that are forced into the criminal justice system.
Well, a lot of users are dealers, at least small-time dealers, but what if they're dealing something as deadly as fentanyl? What do you do about that?
You prosecute them, undoubtedly.
Of course, the other part of your job here is that you have this experience as an entrepreneur.
I do.
You ran a company that does evaluations of medical marijuana. And tell me about the people you employed.
So actually, I sold that company in December of 2017, about eight or 9 months ago. The type of people I employed, again, it was medical cannabis evaluations. My partner and I, we built the largest company in the country in this capacity. The individuals that I employed came from an array of backgrounds, but I can tell you what I've done in both CannaCare along with my other companies, including my law practice. I've employed dozens of individuals that have backgrounds that would preclude them from gaining employment elsewhere. What I mean by that is individuals with significant CORI records, individuals that have been in trouble with the law for a very long time. I actually look at this as a source of strength. When I see an individual that has proactively acknowledged their addiction, proactively taken the steps to beat their addiction, then I look at that as an individual that I want on my team. You have someone's back when they're down. The loyalty that they return when they beat their addiction is tenfold. And I really look at this as this is someone that deserves a second chance, and I've employed that both through my private companies and this practice that I would continue to follow as district attorney.
This is BNN News. We're talking with Michael Maloney, candidate for Suffolk County District Attorney. Michael, one of the most frustrating things for many people about law enforcement these days and the criminal justice system is the large racial gap in solved homicides. How do you see yourself attacking that if you were to be the DA here?
Well, there's a number of different steps. There's not going to be one solution, but I can tell you what's crucially important is office metrics need to be maintained. And what I mean by that is race, gender, ethnicity, and creed of all individuals that are prosecuted by my administration. So you're right in regards to there's an enormous disproportionate effect that there's a disproportionate amount of individuals that come from minorities whose cases are not solved, whose cases are not dealt with in the same manner that individuals from West Roxbury or individuals from Back Bay or Beacon Hill. There's an enormous disparity. And if you don't have office metrics to say, hey, where are we starting on the baseline on day one of the administration, then there's no actual way we can see the progress that you made 3 months out, 6 months out, 9 months out. I've been very vocal in that I will release office metrics on a quarterly basis, and I'll start doing so on day one. In regards to the unsolved shooting, to go back to the core of your question, sir, what I can tell you is that it's a combination. I'm talking about community policing, working with Officer Gross, having...
You mean the commissioner? Yeah.
Commissioner Gross, excuse me, having implicit bias training for all my assistant district attorneys. If we don't acknowledge the problem, then it's foolhardy to pretend that we can rectify the problem.
Well, the problem could be trust or distrust in the criminal justice system. It could also be fear of the street. How do you help people who are afraid that if they give you information, they're going to be exposing themselves?
Well, again, that's not going to be a problem that you're going to solve overnight. The first step is acknowledging that there is a problem. Absolutely, and it'd be foolhardy to say that there's not. I've been practicing as a defense attorney, helping individuals out of the system for a decade. I've seen it many times, and I can tell you, how do we actually help people? How do we address the problem? Like I said, it's working with law enforcement. It's conducting implicit bias training. It's a number of variables, but to say that there's going to be one shorthand approach that is going to be fixed overnight, that's simply not accurate. That's not consistent with the way this industry is carried out. What needs to happen is we need to proactively address the solution and set in course remedies.
Well, I've heard you talk of some firms, and I think there are some ways you'd like to reduce incarceration, and as most of the other candidates did at the time. But on the other hand, you have an issue with a list of offenses, not the biggest offenses in the world, where your rival says she, by default, would not prosecute them. What's your problem with that list?
There's a litany of problems with that list. Again, individuals that have more than 6 months experience in this industry realize that blanket statements simply, they don't hold water. To say that you're not going to prosecute resisting arrest, which is one of the allegations that Ms. Rollins said she's not going to prosecute, that puts law enforcement in a position to fail. It really does. It's disgusting how many law enforcement professionals have been attacked over the past few months. Unfortunately, we just saw another one this past weekend. And to say that you are going to enable individuals to commit resisting arrest, or allow domestic abusers to commit threats and not prosecute that, or allow shoplifting to continue, which is going to destroy the fabric of I'm a small business owner. Last year alone, I sustained over $20,000 in lost profits from theft and shoplifting. There's no way this kind of stuff would not be...
Well, I looked at Rachel Rollins' list. Shoplifting is on that list, but she's a lawyer. She says this is a default position. So if an assistant DA says, this shoplifter has done it before, we got to go after them this time, then one of the superiors can say, yeah, go ahead, prosecute. What's wrong with that?
Again, listen, in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with that. Again, I support, I've been practicing as a defense attorney. I'm not going to leave that experience behind. But to issue blanket statements before you actually take office and use that as the starting point to say, hey, now I'm going to open the lines of communication with law enforcement. Again, the overarching objective of the district attorney is to prosecute, to keep the community safe. If you're going to be the county's top prosecutor, but unilaterally say, hey, I'm not going to prosecute, again, I understand what the intent is, but that really screams of someone that doesn't actually have experience in the court system, trying jury trials, trying bench trials, working with clerks, working with district attorneys, cross-examining law enforcement. Again, this is not something where you can say law enforcement's on this side and the prosecutor's department's on here. These are units and entities that you're going to be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And to say arbitrarily that this is the baseline and we're going to find exceptions from that point forward, that is a recipe for a disaster. It's a recipe to put our law enforcement in positions to fail. It's a recipe for our small business owners to unfortunately experience significantly more loss. I support, again, as a defense attorney, my objective is not to put people in jail. My objective is to incorporate responsible progressive reform based on experience. Now I can say, hey, listen, my objective is to decrease the percentage of minorities, of black, brown, and white that are currently incarcerated, and truly that is.
Well, speaking of incarceration, you had some ideas about changing the bail system even several months ago. How exactly would you do that?
So I can tell you from firsthand experience, when I first started practicing as a criminal defense attorney, I was representing indigent clients via the CPCS bar advocate system. And when I first started, had dozens and dozens and dozens of clients, too many to count, that were actually held for 6, 7, 8 months on $100. And this was a case that the prosecution never intended to seek jail time. That is not going to happen in Suffolk County, and I'll tell you why. Because my office, my administration, will not be seeking bail for cases in which they are not seeking jail time. You know, it sounds like a pretty obvious suggestion, but in practicality, it's something that happens, and it happens to this day. And it perpetuates a cycle that incarcerates poverty, and incarcerates mental health, and it incarcerates addiction. Again, these are societal problems that were forced down the throat of the judicial system. One proactive measure that we can incorporate to stop that, to break that cycle, is not seeking bail for cases that we will not be seeking jail time.
Another bail problem recently cited by Commissioner Gross is about what happens with some repeat gun offenders. He says there are too many of them out there. They're reoffending while they're still awaiting trial, and there's got to be a better way to crack down on that. Would you agree with him?
Undoubtedly I would. Yeah, and so listen, for violent offenders, for what Commissioner Gross is referring to, there are a number of individuals. There are too many individuals that are summarily released, and after they're picked up, a violent offender that's picked up by law enforcement on a Wednesday can be out on a Thursday or Friday and completing the same sort of actions that resulted in him being incarcerated that weekend. It happens all the time. And I tell you, there are other mechanisms that these individuals can be held, and they will be held under my administration. The difference is that we're looking to incarcerate the violent offenders as opposed to the non-violent addicts that are subjected to the system over and over and over.
Thank you very much for being with us.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Michael Maloney, candidate for Suffolk County District Attorney. We'll have more news in just a moment.